wanted to follow up on the coattails of last week. Maybe some of us were here for last week's talk. Reverend Kosei offered us a beautiful talk on some of our non-male ancestors. Ancestors meaning those who carried the Dharma, the Buddha's teaching, and passed it on, all the way from the Buddha himself and the previous Buddhas before him, all the way down to us. And we heard a lot about the challenges and the inspiration and the beauty of the teachings of some of these ancient Indian women, primarily, we talked about. And then after the talk, for those who kind of stuck around for the question and answer, some really potent stuff came up. And it really inspired me to kind of continue that conversation. So basically, the question came up, and I'll just kind of make it my own, so, not really a direct quote, but the question kind of came up, given the oneness and the emptiness of all things, which is a very essential fundamental teaching of the Buddha, then why would we put so much emphasis on our bodies, on our appearance, on our little infinitesimal, meaningless, impermanent, always changing situation? And in Zen, in English at least, it's kind of been a common practice to say things like our skin bags or our meat sacks, I like to say, which is kind of just like a cheeky or sardonic way of pointing to this fact that these are just impermanent. This is not ourself. This is not who we are. And Zazen, the practice of following the Buddha way, is designed to encounter what our true self is outside of this temporary thing. There's a famous koan, "What is your original face before your parents were born?" Who are you deeper than this little self, this small self, is another kind of common phrase. And that is a very important question. That is an essential aspect of the Buddha way, to really see into the emptiness of our karma, basically the causes and effects that have created the conditions of this little life, this little impermanent life. And so, yeah, that's a very important question. And then the response to that, which is totally appropriate, is that because of our karma, because of these little meat sacks, these small selves, people since the beginning of humanity have experienced pain and been marginalized and oppressed and suffer simply because of these quote unquote skin bags. And I do know and respect that some of these phrases like skin bags are triggering. So I'm very happy to say, let's not use that phrase. Let's say small self, impermanent self. And so in our attempt to investigate the nature of suffering, injustice, disharmony, then we have to pay attention to these small selves, to this karma, to these conditions. So this is essentially, I hate to actually use the words, but sometimes, this is so hard to talk about. It reminds me of there's a famous koan where they say, "I feel like a mosquito trying to bite an iron bull." And that's what it feels like trying to talk about this stuff. But it really does represent, this expression of absolute and relative, or real versus phenomenal, all different kinds of ways of saying it. Um, and what the Buddha taught is that both of these realities, the reality of total emptiness and oneness, no small self, is just as real and just as present as our phenomenal or relative reality. Um, the reality of diversity, the reality of cause and effect. And so, even though, or because, I should say, because these two ways of, these two realities seem so diametrically opposed, we are nothing, we are empty, we are something, we are separate. Um, it's very easy to create debate between them, to see conflict between them. And as in the case of what happened last week, to even take offense and to really have harmony jeopardized in this conversation. And, on the one hand, conflict can be problematic. We all want to avoid conflict. That's our natural response. But on the other hand, I think this is a really important conversation. And part of me is kind of happy and encouraged that there was that kind of passion in looking at these challenges. Um, why am I offended? How am I offended? Who is the one being offended, really? Um, and, I think that it's really important. I guess something that's kind of coming up for me is this distinction that I'm seeing between philosophical mind, understanding mind, and then Bodhi mind. Bodhi mind is, kind of a phrase that we see a lot, basically referring to the mind or the drive to wake up to reality beyond my small self, to wake up to what the Buddha taught, to wake up to not two and not one, totally letting go, freedom, freedom from duality and oneness and all of these concepts that we try to apply to things. And so, I think last week there was much more of the understanding philosophical mind at play, um, trying to make sense of things. When things don't line up, the philosophical mind gets offended. Um, and then, of course, we also have our natural triggers. Our nervous system has a mind of its own sometimes that overrides our Bodhi mind and even our philosophical mind. And it's important to see that too. When am I responding out of, you know, reaction, involuntary fight or flight or freeze? And so, yeah, I think a big part of our practice is to see all of the contradictions of our life, emptiness, meaninglessness versus meaning and import, um, wanting to make the best of our life, knowing that this entire universe is going to implode and it means absolutely nothing. Right? This is what brings us to spiritual practice. How do these things make sense? And so I just really encourage us all to approach all of these conundrums of our life with the Bodhi mind and not the philosophical mind. The mind that sees opportunity, that sees a Dharma gate, a gateway to deeper understanding, as opposed to the philosophical mind, which wants to be right, which wants to get things, which wants to impart my understanding and wisdom on others. That I don't think really brings us together, and insofar as we're here as a community trying to awaken together, collective kind of awakening, to really call on that Bodhi mind when someone calls us out, when someone calls us in, when someone gives us feedback, when someone contradicts something we believe in so deeply. Can I approach that with the Bodhi mind? It's very difficult. It's very difficult. And sometimes you can approach things with that openness, that Bodhi mind, that curiosity, and in the end say, no, that person is just wrong and inaccurate and inappropriate. And then we make boundaries. And that's fine. But to really give it, the three tenets that the Zen peacemakers and Bernie Glassman talk about, that's the not knowing part, the first tenet. Really coming to everything with not knowing. And we face barriers, right? In this particular instance, coming from the real or absolute or the empty side. These are all just meat sacks, just a small self. Why do we put so much import on talking about them? I'm just speaking for myself as someone who pretty much falls on the privileged category of the intersectionality chart: white, male, straight, healthy, stable. I face a barrier to really seeing the pain that this small self can cause. I've never known that feeling. Well, I can't say never. I've definitely been rejected from friend groups or made fun of on the playground because I was white. Sure, that happens. But in a real way, really limiting my freedom, really feeling stuck and held down simply because of how I look, I've never experienced that. And no matter how much reading or rallies or relationships or whatever I go to, I have a barrier to truly seeing that. And the importance of waking up to that relative reality, that there are injustices. And then similarly, folks who do fall on the marginalized side of the intersectionality chart, who do, for no good reason at all, go through life experiencing pain, limitation, and oppression simply because of how they look, they might face some extra barriers in really waking up to how empty it is. How are you going to say to a concentration camp inmate, oh, well, your small self and your Judaism doesn't matter because it's all empty? How are you going to tell a woman who has experienced oppression in the workplace and domestic abuse and assault that, oh, well, you should just let go of your skin bag because it's all empty? It doesn't really work like that. There are naturally other barriers. So I think that that's just to say that as a Sangha, as followers of the Buddha way, can we help each other with those barriers? Can we see everybody as Buddha? And when we come up with these difficult conversations, these important, essential, challenging, almost unresolvable conversations of emptiness versus karma, life versus no life, all of these spiritual inquiries, can we help each other? Can we call each other in instead of calling each other out? Can we inspire a Bodhi mind as opposed to a defensive mind? And it's really hard. It's really hard. But just after how it went down last week, I thought it was really important for us as a Sangha to really look at that and really see the importance of both sides. And then, really what happens when you really get deep into this practice and you really sit hard um, with these quandaries, we start to see that this absolute and relative, small self, big self, are not two realities. They are actually one. And that one reality is just this moment, always is the perfect expression of small self and the larger true self. Um, I hope that makes no sense because it makes no sense to me. Um, so yeah, bring our Bodhi mind to even this. What is this? The philosophical mind says, there's a problem to fix. The Bodhi mind says, there's a door there. What is that? What am I missing? So there's like a perfect koan for this exact situation. A koan, for those who are new, is kind of like a Zen parable. Um, what is the sound of one hand clapping is kind of like a pop culture version of a koan. And in our particular lineage, we study something like 650 to 700 koans in the curriculum. And so case number 14, I think, 13 or 14 of the Muman Khan, the Gateless Gate. Um, the monks of the Eastern and Western Hall were fighting over a cat. And Nansen, who's the head teacher or the abbot of this temple, sees them fighting. And he comes along and he grabs the cat. And for some reason, he had a knife in his hand. I guess he was in the kitchen or doing some work or whatever. And he says, "If any of you monks can say a turning word, I will spare the cat." And the monks were just dumbfounded and they couldn't say anything. And so Nansen, in the story, kills the cat. Um, I doubt he did. Uh, a lot of these koans and Zen stories have, chopping off people's fingers and cutting off their arm and beating people with sticks and killing cats. I think we can rest assured that compassion and compassion is leading all of these actions, and a lot of them very possibly could be pantomimed or made up for the sake of the story. Um, so Zen Buddhism does not condone killing animals. You'd be surprised, but there have been many instances that make us put that disclaimer out there. Yeah, we do not kill cats at the Zen Center. We save cats at the Zen Center, really. So no one could say anything. No one could say something beyond this philosophical mind that wants to fight and debate and be right. So then Nansen, the teacher, relays this story to his senior student Joshu later on. Joshu becomes a major figure in these koans as well, but here he's more of a young student. So Nansen tells him about this story. I had to kill the cat because they were fighting and they couldn't say anything. And Joshu simply takes his shoes off, puts them on his head, and walks out. And Nansen says, "Had you been there, I could have saved the cat." So yeah, these sides of the monastery, Eastern, Western Hall monks are fighting. It doesn't say what they're fighting about. They could have been fighting, well, the cat's always on your side, so you should feed it, or you should clean the litter. No, you should clean the litter. You're the one who found it. Um, or more likely, or more appropriate to our circumstances here, maybe they were fighting about, there is no cat. The cat is just an empty cat skin bag. And the other monks are like, no, it is a delicate creature, and we need to honor its karma. And they're fighting about it. They're not inquiring with each other, they're not necessarily growing from each other. They're fighting, digging in. I'm right. You don't see what I see, versus what don't I see that you see? I can tell you, when I made that switch, and I remember very clearly making that switch from, or at least making the commitment to trying to make that switch as much as possible, from you don't see what I see to what don't I see that you see. My life just opened up big time. A lot less anxiety, a lot less enmity, a lot more compassion, patience, and just calm. Um, so yeah, so Nonsense sees them fighting, and I guess in this case, I'm kind of doing the Nonsense thing because I'm stepping in and I'm using all these like Zen words, absolute and relative and Bodhi mind and blah blah blah, and like trying to explain this away. But Nansen, in like true Buddha way form, doesn't try to explain this side or that side. He takes direct action to try to create a moment, a pivotal moment that brings it forth. I'm just quoting the precious mirror of samadhi that we chant every afternoon. Bringing forth that direct moment for people to truly experience Bodhi mind, to really experience the oneness of absolute and relative, emptiness and karma, to see that they are not two things directly. Me sitting here trying to explain it is like, trying to explain the taste of an apple versus actually tasting the apple. So yeah, Nansen is taking this kind of drastic measure um, to help us really feel that, feel what is true beyond my ideas and concepts being right. And so he picks up the cat and he says, if anyone can say a turning word or a word of Zen, something that goes beyond these concepts that we fight about, then I won't kill the cat. And the monks are just dumbfounded. And so he pantomimes killing the cat. And of course, the important symbolism of this action is, the cat would be representing our ideas. What should be, how I should be, how you should be, what the truth should be. I mean, look at what's going on in Gaza. Just everybody digging into what really is how it should be. And if we can just kill our cats, take all of these conditions and patterns and, yes, even traumas. I think traumas are more tricky, and we have better tools nowadays through therapy and other things to address trauma in a more direct way. But even trauma, the practice of zazen, the practice of fully letting go, totally dropping off everything we think we are, everything we think the world is, kill every single cat that we have constructed for ourselves, or in the case of trauma, that has been constructed for us, whether we like it or not. You can kill every cat. And it's from that place of total freedom, freedom from our cats, freedom from our ideas and concepts, freedom from our goals and our vows and our all these things that we create for our life. I should be this, I should have that. Then from that place, we can really communicate and connect. From that place, we can make vows, take action to be of service to one another. So then he later relays this story to Joshu, and Joshu takes his shoes, puts it on his head. There's a lot of interpretations of this. Apparently, in ancient China, putting your shoes on your head was a sign of mourning, grieving. So that would make perfect sense. Um, Showing the importance of killing ourselves, our ideas and concepts, mourning them. But even without that kind of cultural context, uh, shoes don't belong on our head, right? We're very used to this idea that shoes belong on the feet. Shoes need to be on the feet. And so to use this as a kind of metaphor of let's take all these things that we think are and should be, turn them around. Maybe I'm completely wrong about this. What do you see? That's putting our shoes on our head. I always approach this doing this way. What if I do it the opposite way? That's putting your shoes on your head. Um, I'm the kind of person who always has to have my coffee in the morning after blah, blah, blah. Well, what if you don't? What if you allow your roommate to have the bathroom first instead? That's putting your shoes on your head. Totally flexible, totally not attached. That's the non attachment, right? We're so attached to shoes belong on the feet. Um, so, yeah, can we let go of that and live our life fresh, coming from a place of not knowing constantly? And then, of course, there's space, right? Even that, let go of even that, because shoes do belong on the feet. You do take your shoes off before you come into Zendo. You do bow every time you walk in. You turn to the right every time you turn around in the Zendo, right? There is place and power in setting boundaries, making agreements and guidelines for each other. So, yeah, even this killing of the cat, kill that too and keep the cat alive, right? This practice is just constantly shedding, constantly dropping off. You know, Dogen Zenji, who's like a major Zen master of the 13th century, his major enlightenment phrase was dropping off, dropping off. Let go of everything, including letting go, to the point where it just gets so ridiculous that nothing is left. Um, and I really do have faith that from that place of nothing left, then we can communicate from a place of compassion. Then we can really cultivate true wisdom. So um, we are now entering week 8 of Ongo already, which is just crazy. Can't believe that. And, you know, the intimacy that our Sangha, for those of us who are practicing regularly, the intimacy is just so palpable. And I really encourage us to dig in, you know, don't look at the light at the end of the tunnel. Really, let's appreciate the tunnel as much as we can. And let's help each other. Let's help each other kill our cats, put our shoes on our head, and awaken together.